What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. We are your co-hosts, Spencer and Gabe, joined by H.L. Tinsley, aka Holly Tinsley. She's joining us to talk about her new book, The Hallows, which is coming out in March. So we are excited to tell you guys about that and learn more about that book. So with that, you can, if you want to, you can reach out to us on Twitter or Discord or Patreon, which are all linked down in the description. You can also support us by liking and subscribing here on YouTube. That helps us out a lot to get seen by the algorithm and be found by more people like you. So before we go too far into this, I will mention that I am pretty sick right now. I've got like this scratchy throat. So naturally I'm taking care of it by drinking coffee and vaping. So so hopefully it won't be too much of a distraction throughout the episode, but yeah, sorry, my voice is a little wonky today. So let's talk about the Hallows a little bit, and welcome once again, Holly. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me again. Happy 2024.
Yeah, back in the new year. I think the last time we had you on was, God, that had to have been a while ago. Was that your birthday episode? Was that the last time? Or
Do you know, I think it might have been
Yeah, I
actually.
think
I
so.
think it
Yeah,
was.
oh man, that's crazy.
it is crazy.
Well, we always love having you on. You reached out recently and you were like, "Hey, my new book is coming out in March. Would you guys like to talk about it?" And you sent me a reviewer copy a little while ago, and I started reading it, but I told Holly, I was like, "Just so you know, I'm a really slow physical reader." And so I'm gonna try, but I have a feeling that that I'll be able to get through it by March. Would you say that is it as long as We Men of Ash and Shadow, or is it longer?
It's actually a little bit shorter.
Oh,
I think it comes in at about, I think it's just under 100k words, I believe, and I think We Men was about 102. So it's not far off. It's similar.
okay. Cool. Well, I'm liking it so far. I'm liking the ideas of the different magic systems and stuff. I'll let you talk about that in a second, but do you want to give like a basic rundown of what we're looking at with this book compared to the Vanguard series? Because it is pretty different.
I mean, it is very different. I think it's still very much in the vein of kind of the Grimosphere, as I like to call it.
Nice.
Hmm.
But whereas the Vanguard Chronicles, which was my first two books, they were very much grim dark. This is what I like to call grim noir. So it's still grim, but it's got the aesthetics and the kind of vibe and tone of the old kind of film noir detective stories.
Right.
Everyone's really cool. Um, so yeah, the Hallows is a story that follows a guy called Camellia, who is an assessor for the Providence company, and his job is to basically look after the interests of this company who control a substance called the Hallow, which is very important in the world because it allows certain people to access certain abilities and skills. So, in the line of his work, he comes across a couple of bodies, few people disappear. There's lots of shenanigans going on in the background, and it's down to him to investigate and see what happened to these people. And he is ably assisted by a number of floating nuns and 7-foot lizard women. And his friends, and yeah, it's a really cool adventure story. I think it's got a lot more humor in it. I think it's got a lot of quite British humor. I
Okay.
would I would say. And yeah, I just hope people have fun with it. And there's magic in this one as well. So
Yeah.
finally
Yeah,
wrote a book with magic in it.
yeah, there's like straight up magic in this one. And in the Vanguard series, we see some supernatural elements. It's really hard to describe to people every time I try with the Vanguard series. I'm like, yes, there's magic, but there's not like it's kind of it's more of like a supernatural element to the story. But with this one, uh even in like the first chapter or two, we're seeing there's the drug the drug is the Hallow, right?
Hallow, yeah.
The Hallow. Um, and e- everybody who uses the drug has a different reaction to it. So some people may use it and have one magical ability and they may like float, or another person may be able to I forget what the other guy in the first couple chapters was able to do. He was able to think more critically or something. And so there's different aspects to the different how each person individually reacts to the same drug. And I thought that was pretty cool. I liked that idea. I was almost thinking of like Mistborn, where like they have like the different metals or whatever, but they're all like ingesting a metal, and
Yeah.
depending on what kind of person you are, you may be able to push and pull things, you may be able to, affect people's emotions or whatever. And so it kind of made me think of that a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I like the way you said, Vanguard's a hard one to explain to people. Try explaining this one to people. I mean, I keep trying. People are like, what's the book about? I'm like, well, there's like nuns that fly, and there's a magic drug, and there's, people that disappear. It's just it's hard to explain, but it is a lot of fun. So
Yeah. Do we get into situations in the book where we have like kind of like the Mistborn thing, where we have like a couple people or like a team of people, and they're all having to use their magical attributes in different ways to solve problems?
I mean, that's very much a part of what Cam and his the other assessors do. So part of their job is that because they are there to look out for the interests of the company and the people and the city in general, if there's situations where people are out of control on this drug, they go in, but they utilize the drug themselves to then be able to handle that situation. So there are people who are in the assessor teams who have particular attributes like strength or speed or stamina, so they then use that to control the situation essentially.
Nice. So are
That's
there
awesome.
Spencer is saying, everybody has a different reaction to this substance, right? So does that mean that, your main character, any other side characters or whatever that you use the substance, they have the same power every time they use it, and it never changes?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
from birth. They are a particular type of old, and the drug reacts that way with them. Yeah.
So what is the world of the Hallows look like? Because I know we're in kind of like a 1920s era, right? Is that kind of what it's going for?
Yeah, I'd say it's kind of late 1920s. So the world is very much already come to terms with things like electricity and cars, telephone. So all that technology is already embedded in there as part of the world. Aesthetically wise, it's a lot of it I drew from places like Belgium, and kind of 1920s Europe. So
Awesome.
um, Amsterdam, Belgium, France, all those kind of cool, really arty cities where it was all um, the chic and the modern way of living of the 1920s. So like your flappers and your discos. Did they have discos in the 1920s? I don't know.
I'm sure they
Nightclubs.
did.
I'm sure they did, but nightclubs anyway. So it's very much that scene where it's all decadent and
Speakeasies.
speakeasies, yeah, bootleggers, liquor, all that good stuff that just looks really cool and really like slick and gorgeous.
That's so funny that you mentioned like France and Belgium and all these places being like the height of the 1920s, because it must be like a UK thing, because as an American, I'm thinking like New York, Chicago, like
That's
those being like the height of the 1920s. It's funny.
I
because
mean,
we,
that's
we
true, but you have to remember a lot of the styles that they were using came from France, like the Art
Yeah,
Nouveau, like that kind of
that's true.
movement.
Yeah. So who's our main character? Who are we mostly following throughout this? Because we have Vanguard, who's kind of our guy throughout that series so far. Do we have someone like him, or is it multi POV?
This is very much a singular POV. It stays with Camellia, who is the main character. Funnily enough, he's actually featured in one of my other stories.
Mm-hmm.
He was in a few years ago. I did a anthology called Skybreaker.
Mm-hmm.
I had to think for the title, Skybreaker. And I did a short story for that, which was set in a prison. And the main guy, when I wrote him, I kind of knew that I wanted to do some more work with him, and that I really liked this character, and I could kind of see a storyline progressing, but it didn't work in the world that I had him. So I took him from that story, and I've put him into this new world of the Hallows. So he was already quite established in my mind when I started the book.
Mm.
In terms of character, he does have some similarities to Vanguard, because let's face it, it's me, and I write a particular kind of character. They're always going to be a little bit grisly. They're always going to be a little bit angry at the world.
Batman.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly.
Grimdark Batman.
I've got a type and I stick to it. But I think the difference with Cam is that he is very much, I wouldn't say sociable, but he relies on other people much more. So he is very integrated into his team. He has very close bonds and relationships with the other guys that he lives with in this house, where they all work together. He has very close bond with the housemaid in the house as well. He's got these friendships with the people in the church. So he is part of a much wider social circle than Vanguard was. And he leans on these people to give him support. And if anything, he actually probably makes more, not mistakes, but the decisions he makes are very much driven by wanting to do right by the people around him, whereas Vanguard doesn't really care that much.
Yeah, right. Yep. So what made you want to tell his story? Like going from Vanguard to the Hallows, what sparked this story? What was it that was the inspiration for this, that made you want to go from like kind of this Victorian, I don't know what city specifically inspired you for Vanguard, but like I picture like a Victorian London kind of thing to the Hallows. Where did that how did you bridge that gap inspiration wise?
It's quite interesting the way it came about, because as I said, I'd already got this character that I knew I wanted to use for a project, but at the time I wasn't sure where I wanted to put him, or what that story was going to look like. And for the kind of the first few years that I was writing, I was so consumed by Vanguard and all the things that he was doing, that I put out the first book, I put out the second book, and then it got to this sudden point where everything just stopped after the second book came out. And up until then, I'd kind of really been going at a high speed with everything. So it was just from launching the first one to getting to the second one, it kind of felt like it was the blink of an eye. And I had this weird like moment where it felt a bit like being thrown out of a car, like someone just slammed the brakes on and it stopped. And I was like, okay. And it was really a difficult thing, because I realized that I didn't really have any idea where I was or what I was doing. I knew in terms of Vanguard's story where I was going to go next, but I kind of looked at where I'd started as a writer, where I was at that point, and I really hadn't had time to catch up with myself. So where Vanguard was concerned, I still love writing him, but I absolutely had to just stop, because we needed a break. We've been together for 6 years now, so needed a bit of time apart. So I thought I'll try and write another project, and I probably for the best part of a year, I had massive writer's block. I had huge imposter syndrome. It was like all the confidence that I'd had over the past 6 years just got sucked out of me over the couple of months. So even just putting pen to paper became really difficult. So I did what all people do in that situation. I got on my sofa with my duvet and I watched TV for about 4 months. And while I was watching TV, however, I was watching Critical Role. I did a rewatch of the first season of Critical Role, and there's a character in that called Percy, who is played by Taliesin Jaffe. So I say his name wrong there. He's just an amazing inspiration to me. Like, he's a great writer. He's just a great creative. Love all the stuff he does. And his thing with the character of Percy was looking at hubris and kind of, the curse of ambition and how that can affect people and how it can take over their lives. And I just suddenly thought, okay, I've got this character. I want to write something about hubris and about somebody who wants to achieve something at any cost, whether it's for good, for bad. And I started writing about this drug. And initially he was going to be a dealer of this drug.
Oh, okay.
But I just couldn't get it to work because I needed the character to essentially be good. And, I'm sure there are lots of lovely drug dealers, but it's quite difficult to write in a way that people be sympathetic. So he then became an assessor, and then the story grew out of that. So yeah, that's a really waffly, long-winded answer, but it's basically I went from being kind of totally blocked and no idea what I was going to do, and basically feeling like I wanted to give up, to like, okay, now I've got this character, and yeah, Critical Role. That's where it came from.
That's awesome.
That's cool. Yeah, I was not expecting that. I didn't know that you had such a hard time in between Vanguard and the Hallows. That's really cool that you were able to find a way to still express like your creative writing, but just in a different way that was clicking with you better. Do you feel like the anthologies that you've put out over the past couple of years, did they help as like other writing exercises, like with Skybreaker and Anatomy of Fear?
I mean, Skybreaker probably not so much, purely for the reason I didn't really have an awful lot to do with that process. I just wrote my story, and we had a group chat and we chat, and that was it. There was an editor that took care of it and all this.
Right.
But I think Anatomy probably did help in the sense that it was a different kind of project. It was obviously a lot more people involved, but also the management of it was entirely different to managing and marketing and publishing a book just by yourself. I didn't expect it to eat up so much of my time as well. That was the other thing. I really went in quite naive to this project and thought it's going to be really easy. And it was like a full-time job for the best part of a year to get that book organized and out. So that, again, sort of not took away from my own projects, but just moved my attention into a different area. And I'm glad it did, because it was a really good project to work on. But yeah, it didn't get me any closer to writing my own books.
Do you, after doing Anatomy of Fear, do you think you'll ever do it again?
I mean, I would never say never, because there's so many good things about that project. And I think with hindsight, like I say, I did go in very naive, and I think I had some preconceived ideas about how things were going to play out that didn't quite work. So to do it again, I think I would be more well informed now. But at the same time, I think I would also be a little bit more hesitant, knowing the level of work involved. But yeah, I mean, I'm all up for projects like that in the future.
That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I really liked Anatomy of Fear. I just finished the audiobook for it like a month ago, maybe. And man, Zamil Akhtar's story, I had to send him a message and be like, dude, that was incredible. Like, oh my gosh, that scared the crap out of me. And then there was a couple other ones that were really good and scary. I wish I could remember kind of like the table of contents of them all. But yeah, there was a lot of really, really good short stories in there.
Yeah, I think I read Zamil's once, and that was it. I was like, I read it during the editing process, and I was like, I'm never reading it again.
Yeah.
Too much for me.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh, it sounds like I need to read it.
Yeah, it's in my library if you want to check it out. It's basically a collection of short stories that are all horror. And they're all based around a body part. So I think Zamil's was skin.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah. And like some of it is like some of it is kind of body horror, and then like a lot of it isn't. It more has to do with like the theme of fear and the theme of like whatever that body part represents. But they were all really good. I had a great time with it. So speaking of listening to the audiobook for Anatomy, is there an audiobook coming for Hallows?
I'm undecided at the moment, because I love doing audiobooks, and I know that you always want the audiobook. I think I'm just going to start recording my books just for you, so I can send them to you. You can listen to my voice droning on.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to do an audiobook of the Hallows. I think when it comes to putting out new books, especially, it's just as much as I don't want to be like mercenary about it, it is the cost. And
Oh
it is
yeah.
Yeah.
it's such a cool thing to do, but it's such a high cost to it when it's an unknown
Yep. Unknown
Right.
product.
factor.
It's a
Yeah.
new series. It's not like with the third Vanguard book where I'll absolutely have to do an audio book. There'll be no choice whatsoever. I think
Yeah.
if people ask for it and if there's a demand for it, then yeah, it's definitely something that I want to do.
Yeah.
It's just not something that I can do immediately on release.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all know who would be doing that.
I know, right? I know. As I'm reading it, I'm hearing RJ's voice narrate it.
Yeah.
And that happened to me with the last Vanguard book as well. I was like, he knocked it out of the park so much with that first Vanguard book that when I read the arc for the second one, the whole time it was just like RJ's narration. And then when I listened to the audiobook, I'm like, I got this exactly right. Like I pictured him saying this phrase this certain way, and he has such a distinctive voice that I knew exactly how he would say that sentence.
Yeah.
And so yeah, major props to RJ. But yeah, I think that's one thing that I don't know, kind of needs to get figured out in the indie space, right? Like there's got to be a way to get narration that isn't gonna break the bank. And I think that obviously voice actors should be paid everything they're worth. Like RJ is great at his job. So many of these voice actors are so great at their job. Um, but yeah, it's such an interesting conversation because there's so many indie books that I love, like We Break Immortals by Thomas Howard Riley, but the audiobook for that would be like $6,000-7,000 if not more, because it's such a long book. Um, and so yeah, I don't know. It's such a hard thing for the indie space to try to get that stuff figured out.
It is. I think just to kind of jump on that point a little bit as well, because obviously you've already said that voice actors, narrators, producers, they absolutely deserve to earn what they are worth. And, you know, believe me, RJ Bailey, prime example, he is so worth, you know, paying to get this quality product made. I think the problem lies in where the audiobooks are being sold and how they're being sold, because what tends to happen is people say, is there an audiobook coming out? And as an author, you then immediately feel like, oh God, you know, people want an audiobook. We've got to get it out. You then get it made. But then that doesn't necessarily translate into sales.
Sales.
Yeah.
A lot of that comes from it's getting so hard now for indie authors to get audiobooks and products like that out into places where they can be sold. I mean, there's been like all the furor over Spotify this week. So that's obviously made things harder for authors because you know, no one wants to put their book on a platform that's essentially saying they're going to control their intellectual property. So
Is that what's
it's just
going on with Spotify? I don't know about this.
Yeah, so I haven't looked into it fully yet, but there's quite a few videos and things going around where they've changed their terms of service, where if you upload an audiobook now, they basically own that intellectual property. That's what they're saying. They own those characters, they can remake your book, they
Oh my
can
goodness.
re-record it and sell it. So you're essentially giving them the right to take your work,
That's
take
crazy.
all you've done and make profit off it and not pay you anything. So
No way.
you know,
Wow.
it's feeding into this whole issue of it becomes so hard to making an audiobook profitable that it is affecting the authors. It's then obviously a byproduct affecting the narrators and the producers as well. So yeah, it's not easy at the moment.
You know, did I hear something about Brandon Sanderson taking his stuff off of Spotify? Is that who pulled his there was some famous author recently that pulled his stuff off Spotify, like just in the past couple weeks. Or at least I'd only heard about it in the past couple weeks. And I wonder if it was someone like Sanderson for that reason, because I know Joe Rogan left Spotify, and he's not putting out audiobooks, but I have to imagine if Spotify is putting those same terms on audiobooks, they have to be doing the same with podcasts. Like we basically own your intellectual property, which is your podcast. That's terrifying. That really sucks for authors, and if they are doing the same for podcasters, that really sucks for them, especially someone as big as like a Brandon Sanderson on the audiobook side, or like a Joe Rogan on the podcast side.
Yeah, 100%.
What there's also a lot of stuff with Audible that, like, Amazon is just famous for not paying their authors very well, and I've had some conversations with different authors that have shown me basically like the receipts from what they make from Audible, and it's astounding. It's literally like, for the price of the audiobook, I think it's like 20% is what they're making back, if that. So if you buy like a $40 audiobook, whatever 20% of that, that's all they're getting at the end of the day for like take home.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's the burden of authors, and I think any indie creator, isn't it, that no matter what you do, you're going to get the minimum recompense compared to everyone else in the chain above you. But
Yeah,
it's just unfortunate. It's the system we have to work within.
yeah, it's really too bad. There needs to be a new competitor to the audiobook space that does it more fairly, and I think that's what Brandon Sanderson was trying to find for a while, because he was kind of leading the charge of like, all my stuff is coming off Amazon, and that's why he started putting them on Spotify, because he was just like, I don't like what authors are being paid for this. And especially if you don't, the way it was explained to me is that if an indie author does not choose to have their book Amazon exclusive, like Audible exclusive, then they get even less. So it goes down from like 20 to like 15, or from 25 to 20 maybe. They get like a significant pay decrease if they do not have their book exclusive to Amazon, which is just a really big bummer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry for the downer topic.
I mean, it's a little bit of a downer, but at the same time, it just is the facts of
Yeah.
the community and the world that we kind of live in. It is what it is. I will say, however, that with the whole audiobook thing, what I think is really interesting is that people are kind of taking this situation in hand and going, okay, well, we need to find another way, because people want audiobooks, so we need to find ways to be able to make them.
Yeah.
And hence we've had this huge like boom in audiobook Kickstarters, which I think is amazing, because it's almost becoming itself the new way to buy and to make audiobooks, because obviously you do a Kickstarter, you know that the people back it, they really want the product, they're going to make it happen, and it's such a great way, I think, to get not just audiobooks, but games, books, anything creative out there. It's a really good way of doing it, for me anyway, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I've been saying for a while now, I'm glad that it's finally becoming a thing that people are doing, because I was saying for a while now that we need to just start making Kickstarters for these books to get them audiobooks, like with We Break Immortals. I would love to run a Kickstarter for that, to get it enough money to get an audiobook from it, because I just want to hear that book so bad. And I'm glad that people are starting to do it. We saw it with sorry, I'm forgetting his name. I think it was Joe Lee with his series. RJ narrated his books, and he had a Kickstarter going that got funded. And with Kickstarter, you're not always going to get funded, but it's a very good chance that, if you're I guess popular enough in the book community, if enough people like really like your book and want to see some audio from it, then there's a good chance that you'll get funded, I think. I mean, like, I haven't ran a Kickstarter, so I don't know what the odds are, but it seems like a good bet, and I'm glad that a lot of authors are doing it now.
Okay, so Holly, my question for you about your book is, the company that your main character works for, are they like is it a pharmaceutical company or is it a, something along those lines? Because I'm assuming the substance is connected with them.
So the company that Cam works for, it kind of works on two different levels. Well, possibly three different levels, actually. It's kind of complicated because I like to complicate things for myself. So the company he works for, the Providence company, they make, distribute, and kind of control the Hallow that goes out into the city and into the country and that people take. But they themselves are part of the old church, which is the religion of the old bloods, which are the people who can take the Hallow. So the church has been around for thousands and thousands of years. So the company itself is run by the Mother Superior Asha, who has this team of nuns. She has like different orders that work within the company. So there are ones that look after public relations, there are ones that look after security, and there are ones that look after the scientific research. So everything that the Providence company does is for the benefit of and controlled and regulated by the church. So essentially Cam works for the church, but the specifics of the Hallow is from the Providence company.
Gotcha.
So it's all kind of interwoven, and it's all faith, religion, business, politics, science. It's all in just this one kind of corporate umbrella for the city.
Okay.
Cool.
So, and it was very cool to write something like that. It was like,
Yeah.
if you can imagine like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but they make drugs and they're run by nuns.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Love it.
Do we find out in the book, like, would it be too much of a spoiler to talk about like where the Hallow came from, or like how it's
made?
Yeah, is that something that comes into play deeper in the book?
No, I mean, I don't think it would be spoiler territory to talk about it. I think it's a part of the book. Obviously, it does get explained, but I think it's not going to affect anyone's enjoyment of the storyline. So the
Sure.
Hallow it's like a botanical substance, so it's naturally occurring. It grows from a flower from a tree called the Olden tree, which in their sort of lore of the world was the tree that was touched by the hand of the old god. And it kind of bestowed upon it this sacred power. So they use the flowers and they make this serum, which they then use to create the Hallow, which people take like a medicine, and it obviously unlocks these kind of skills and powers and things within them.
Sweet.
Okay,
That's cool.
nice.
Is there only one tree?
I mean, there's lots of trees now. There's one tree which is the original one, which was like it's like any kind of religious law, it's like the one tree, and then the rest all now have this magical power. So
Gotcha.
there's several.
Is there like good Hallow and bad Hallow, like how you would have like good, like higher quality like cocaine or whatever?
I mean, there's the Hallow, which is what the Providence company make, which is like the legitimate product. But then you have things like bootleggers, and I think there's smugglers who will take that and try to emulate it, or they'll try and dilute it, and then obviously that leads to poor reactions when people take it, that kind of thing.
Interesting. Okay, that's a cool element to it. I like that. Like moving from the Vanguard series to the 1920s, because you're kind of working from like a Victorian era to a like roaring 20s, I guess. I don't know what else to call that era really. But what was there any difficulty in like difference in world building, or just general like style of the eras, or just the two worlds being very different? Do you think, is this one particularly more complex than the Vanguard's world, or are they fairly similar?
I think what was interesting about writing this world is that with Vanguard's world, it's very much the world is what it is and nothing is changing. There's no expectation of change. Everyone's kind of stuck in this system where, no one is moving forward or progressing. Whereas in the Hallows, the whole world is just caught up in this like really fast journey of progression where they're starting to modernize, and You know, they've got cars, like I say, they've got electricity, they've got trains. It's everything is technologically advancing at a really fast pace, and that is causing a separation between the haves and the have-nots. So again, it's the decadence of, you know, going into these nightclubs and driving around in these sleek cars, and having all these really cool new advances at their disposal, but at the same time they're leaving behind all these people who are still stuck in this kind of old way of life, you know, and not able to take advantage of all this new cool modern stuff that's going on. So I think where Vanguard's world was all dark, I think the contrast between the dark and the light and the good and the bad, not so much in terms of, you know, people's attitudes, but in terms of, you know, this is the good part of life, this is the bad part of life. It's much more obvious, I think, in Cam's world. And I think that in itself bothers him as a character, because he sees this runaway train that everybody kind of wants to get on, and he's not necessarily convinced that, you know, all these new shiny things are a good idea. So yeah, it's very cool to write about, and I love writing about social change. That's probably my favorite theme to write about. So I think to have something like the old church, you know, which is rooted in tradition and law going back thousands and thousands of years, and to have them suddenly, in order to survive, have to become, you know, this modern corporate entity where they've got, you know, a reception area with nuns on the telephone, like fielding calls from the press, that kind of thing. It's a really interesting thing to kind of dig into.
That's cool.
Yeah. That's really cool. I think you do such a good job with making a city feel alive, and it sounds like that's kind of what this city is doing. Like with Dorsey, it felt like a character in the story, and that's kind of what this city sounds like. What's the name of this one, the city?
Marianne.
Marion. That's cool. I like I like the distinction between, in Vanguard, we were watching a society that had essentially crumbled. Like even the people that were in power were not living in like decadence, really. But in this one, there's like a stark contrast between the people at the top and the people at the bottom, and kind of the new and the old. I think that's really cool. And you mentioned how Cam is kind of like wary of like new technology, and not sure if it's the best thing for their society. And with everything with like AI right now, I feel the exact same way, so I'll probably agree with him a lot of the time. Okay, well, before we get into some like kind of off topic or just general discussion, is there anything else that you want to say about this book, release dates, anything like that?
Yes, so it is due out on the 22nd of March. There is going to be pre-releases available later on this month, towards I think the 24th of February. Around about then, I'll have to just double check. But yeah, I just hope people like it, and if you want to pick up a copy, that would be amazing. And yeah, hopefully people will really enjoy spending time with 7-foot lizard people and, you know, nuns that won't stay on the ground.
Have you had reviews come in already?
I've had a few. I think, do you know what? It's one of those weird things where I think the more books that you do, I think the more difficult a book release becomes. I think on your first one, it's almost easier because you don't know what to expect, so you don't kind of know what you're doing. Whereas this one, obviously now it's about the fifth, I think, that I've brought out in total, including the anthologies. And I just don't know where the time is going, because I have so much stuff planned in to chat to people and to send people arcs and do all this stuff. And I just don't seem to have like time to do any of it. And I don't know why. I don't know how this happens. So
Yeah.
yeah, I need to really get on it and send out some more copies to people and hopefully get some more reviews.
That's great. Well, the reviews that you've gotten so far are pretty positive. I've been seeing people comment on it here and there, or like if sometimes you retweet something, and I'm like, I'm glad people are enjoying it, because I think that this is going to be just as good as the Vanguard books. It sounds like there's a ton of really cool world building, a lot of really cool characters, a lot of really cool like dark, grim dark elements. And so I'm excited to continue my read with it. I need to get on it and get it read by the release date, because I definitely want to put out a review for it as well, because this sounds like a ton of fun. And yeah, guys, coming out March 22nd, so keep an eye out for it. You can get it in, I assume, paperback and Kindle. And if it's past, well, we'll put a link down below when it does release. We'll put a link in the description so you guys can check it out there. But with that, we're gonna move into some general discussion. It may not necessarily be off topic from book chatter and whatnot, but we're gonna kind of move along into some other discussion that we want to have. So I'm going to put this out as its own video for promotion for the Hallows. If you are watching this as its own video later, you can check out the full episode right here in the annotations, or right here wherever it comes up, pops up somewhere up here. But you can click on that and check out the rest of the video. You'll just have to scroll through this portion first. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us. If you are here just for the video, thank you for hanging out, and check out The Hallows by H.L. Tinsley.